It's the same here. We always think that we're being loud, and then most of the time we get told to play louder.
That is not my experience at all. But
when I say we, I'm talking about the harps.
Hi everyone, welcome to OSA Backstage. Today you are in for a treat. We're talking with Janna Young, Principal Harp, and Paul Matthews, Principal Percussion. They are so fun, and what they do is so cool. I think you're going to love it. We talk about why chimes are the worst. We talk about gatekeeping Sleigh Ride. Yes, you heard that correctly. And we talk about manifesting your own Nutcracker career. You're going to love it. Enjoy.
Guys, thank you so much for doing this. Would you please introduce yourselves?
I'm Paul. I play percussion with the symphony.
I'm Janna. I'm the principal harpist here.
Paul, what position do you have?
Let's try this again.
I'm principal percussionist with the symphony.
There we go. Awesome. We've been asking this of everybody. Do you remember your first concerts that you got to see?
So, funny enough, the first orchestra that I ever heard in my life is the orchestra that now I am a member of.
Which is the secret orchestra that we don't know about.
Yes. No, it is the Omaha Symphony. I'm originally from Omaha. And I remember a number of concerts throughout my life that I saw as a child. But I was asking my mom what was the first one that I saw. And it was an outdoor concert at Memorial Park, 2003. And I don't remember that concert, but that was the first one. My mom does, yes.
Outdoor concert at Memorial Park. We have not done that for a while. Okay, because Memorial Park's got that like huge slope to now, like were we at the bottom, were we at the top? I have so many questions. Were you already playing music at that point?
Definitely not. But
how old were you?
I was 3 at that time.
Oh, you weren't already like kinder musicking?
Not yet. I started music in general at 6, so I still had some time at that point.
Nice. Janna, how about you?
I don't think that I actually watched any orchestra concerts growing up, but I grew up doing ballet, and so we did have live music in the pit.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah.
Okay. You had a live orchestra. So was it like traditional Nutcracker, or was it just...
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I remember doing Nutcracker. I think for the other shows we did recorded music, but Nutcracker we definitely had the Lexington Philharmonic, and that was really fun.
That's super sweet.
Yes.
What role were you dancing?
At which point in time?
Okay, what role did you eventually get to for Nutcracker?
Ooh. I think probably Marzipan was
The high
one,
ones.
yeah, higher one, as well as in the first act they have the little toys that pop out of the box, and so I was my name was, I think I was the Columbine, and my friend was Harlequin.
But you've danced almost every role, basically, in the core.
In the core, yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
for sure.
Is ballet something you've continued?
I will take class every once in a while. Mm-hmm. This is really embarrassing, but in college, doing classes, like I was enrolled in a course, I broke my foot doing ballet. Just by jumping and landing on it wrong. So that kind of, I was like, okay, I'm getting older. I need to be more gentle with my body.
I love that that's what you took away from it. My body is not giving up.
Honestly, I was just really embarrassed.
Was it a big jump?
No.
Oh.
No, that's the thing is that they have, Grand Allegro, which is like when you see them like splitting their legs in the air. And then there's Petit Allegro that they do during class. And that's when you like are just jumping in place. And it was just a foot off the ground, just snap.
So we discovered that piccolo is an extreme sport, but ballet is also apparently an extreme sport.
You never know. It's said that it like takes more effort for a ballerina to dance a show than it does for a football player to like play a single half of a game.
I don't think I want to test that right direction. Were you when you were dancing in the Nutcracker with the Lexington Philharmonic, which is tremendous? Were you already playing music?
At that point in time, I don't think that I had started, no.
Okay, so how did both of you then, What were your first instruments? Because in my house, drums were immediately off the table. And harp was not even something that I could conceive of. So what were your first instruments, and then how did you get into your current instrument?
Yeah, no, I mean, drums were not my first instrument. My parents did not buy me a drum set when I was like 5 years old. I started as a pianist at 6, and I played piano all throughout, my childhood, all through high school. And I really did enjoy piano a lot, but I started percussion in middle school, and I sort of did both simultaneously. And I sort of just gravitated more towards percussion over time, and here I am.
What do you think like tilted the scale toward percussion?
It's always a tough one to say. I think ultimately piano is something I did by myself. I had a great piano teacher, supportive family and everything with piano. But percussion, I was doing it in school. I was doing it in band with my friends. It became sort of a social thing. And I just sort of had that drive to get better at it through that, I think.
I want to make sure I circle back to that later. Okay, Janna, how about you?
Actually, same, piano at 6 years old.
Okay.
My older brother did piano, and I wanted to do everything that he did, and so he then started taking guitar lessons, and I decided I hated the guitar for some reason. And my parents went to some kind of concert, saw Harp there, and did not know what they were getting themselves into.
It's the opposite of something you can fit in your backpack.
You're right. They really didn't know.
But they still came home. Did you come home with the harp? Did they come home with the harp?
So they asked if
harp?
it would be something that I was interested in. And then I said, yeah, sure, why not? And so then we got a little lever harp is what they're called. They're like smaller versions.
Okay, if you've been to a concert, a symphony concert, you've seen the main harp on stage, right? What is a lever harp size-wise, complicated-wise? What's the difference?
They range in size. There are some that are probably height-wise maybe a foot or so, like smaller, all the way down to like being lap-size harps. So they're probably about 2 feet tall. And then levers are just a different form of controlling the pitch of the harp. So a concert pedal harp, like the one that I use here at the symphony, has pedals, 7 pedals that you would press with your feet in order to create different pitches. Whereas lever harps just have levers for each one of the strings.
Okay. All right, I'm going to try and pretend like I understand. I think I understand what you're saying, but it sounds like it was a slippery slope to full-fledged harp, and you didn't realize you were on it until you were well into it. Does that feel accurate?
Yes.
At what point did your parents realize that they had made a mistake?
When I decided I wanted to do this as a career. Before then, they loved it.
In the moment, you're like, Mom, Dad, we're taking it to college. Okay, were you thinking orchestra career? Or were you thinking, for percussion, it feels a little more straightforward to a degree, because I feel like there are 3 tracks in my mind that you can follow as a percussionist. You can go timpanist, you can go percussionist, or you could go jazz, alternative, all the other.
Yeah, I think anymore there's sort of like infinite paths. And doing the orchestral thing is, pretty specialized. I sort of just, it was the only sort of logical way to go. I liked playing in big ensembles. I had, good mentors and teachers that told me, you can do this for a career. And I was like, this sounds like, a good thing to do. So it's sort of single track minded, kind of through high school, through college. I knew I wanted to play with orchestras.
Okay. That makes sense to me, but not necessarily for you.
So like I said, I grew up doing ballet, and when I figured out that wasn't going to work as a career path for me, I didn't really know what else that I wanted to do. Decided that I would explore this option. Originally set out to be a pit musician, actually. I really wanted to be
Oh, you wanted to be your own harpist at Nutcracker.
Yeah.
Okay, so Nutcracker is Serena's favorite piece.
Yep.
You wanted to be your own. Oh.
Yes. I desperately, yep.
Okay, if you have never heard the Nutcracker, in Waltz of the Flowers, that intro is all about you. What are you supposed to do? Okay, this is actually a great question for both of you. And how do you not, I'm married to a trombonist, I'm very familiar with the idea of sitting.
Yeah.
But that's his face versus your hands. And you essentially, and your feet rather, because that's something that you also have in common. You have 4 independent entities that have to do things sometimes. If you're playing kit, if you are doing any sort of complicated key signature stuff, because your slippery slope to harp nonsense took you to full-blown concert, huge harp, right?
Yes.
How do you not ice yourselves out? Because you guys end up sitting for huge amounts of time.
There's really no other option,
Okay.
like you just sometimes have to sit for a long time and, stay mentally in the moment, not doze off, not just like lose it. And, it's just something that has come with experience, you get used to that over time. And then it's just like, just go up, play it, and it goes how it goes. You can't overthink it really.
Do you do anything while you're waiting? I've been next to percussionists in pits who are just casually keeping their wrists warm throughout.
Not really. I think, when you're on stage, like you're in that moment, you don't want to be sort of like thinking about technique or thinking about your hands too much. It's just like you're in performance mode. You're just, there to do your job ultimately.
How about you?
So a lot of harpists will bring like hot hands or gloves or something to like try to subtly keep your hands warm. I'll just kind of sit there and like mess with my fingers a little bit to warm them up right before I'm supposed to play. But I'm like Paul, I'm pretty nosy. And I like to be fully engaged with what the rest of the orchestra is doing. It's always very interesting to watch individual players, to watch the conductors and just stay in the moment. A lot of people will bring books to read and stuff, but I just enjoy being present.
Yeah. And that's, anything we do on stage with the orchestra, that's definitely true. In like an opera setting where you have the opportunity to leave the pit, that can be nice to sort of be able to reset and not have to focus, for something that might be 2-3 hours, and you play for 5 minutes.
But it's the most important 5 minutes.
Oh, no, of course. Always.
Man. So I'm guessing there's some score study involved then, because if you're the phenomenon of hundreds of measures of rest just marked like 170 out in a score, you probably need to know just as well as say like Serena does what exactly is going on, so you can listen to like to actual cues, or what's happening before you have to enter. Do you enjoy that, or is that a part of your prep?
Oh, well, it has to be, and even like you might think, oh, this cue's good, but like then you get into the live setting and it's like, I can't really hear that so well. So actually like, no, I need to know, sort of the broad strokes, the structure, what the sequence of events is before your entrance. So no, like definitely knowing the piece, even through long tacits, is pretty important.
Yeah, agreed. I also like to do a lot of score studying, and it's more just because that I'm nervous I'm going to come in wrong. No matter what, even if I have cues written in, I will still be counting the measures every single time.
Never goes away.
Yeah.
It only takes one time of messing up to sort of stick with you forever.
The eternal burn of shame.
Yes.
When did you... Okay, so you want to be a pit musician. When did that switch into full-blown orchestra? Were you in college at that point?
Yes, I actually had never played with an orchestra until college, and the second that I did, then I was like, wow, this is incomparable to everything else.
Do you remember what that concert was?
I looked it up,
Mhm.
and I think I played Escales by Ibert, and I was second harp, and honestly, I'm not familiar with that piece. I don't remember it at this point in time, but I know that I really enjoyed it.
Okay, that brings me to another question I had for both of you. Janna, I want to start with you. We have 2 masterworks back to back where you have an actual harp section and not just you.
Mhm.
How do you even begin to approach that as what I imagine is a solitary instrument background?
Yeah, I think it's different for each person. I am lucky enough to be able to bring in people that I know will work with my sound well, that I know to be good orchestral musicians. And so that makes a world of difference, being able to trust your second to stand on their own. But it is much, much harder for us to play in a section than it is individually, because I'm usually just responsible for myself, not for anyone else. When I'm in a section, I am responsible for that second person. If they mess up, it's on me.
Are you listening for something in particular? You feel like a second harpist has to stand on their own, but sometimes there's lots of unison playing. There has to be a lot of the same sound world. How do you prepare for that before that person even takes the stage with you?
That's when you have a sectional and you say, exactly how long are you taking rolling this chord? Kind of, are you going to give cues on this part? You just go through every single measure of music with the other person and make sure that you're on the same page for everything. And of course, it changes after you've had the first rehearsal, and then you just regroup and do it all again.
In your case.
Yeah. It's a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm very rarely ever by myself. I, almost always have a section, or I have the timpanist, there next to me. And like that, sort of serves as a little unit always. So.
But if each of you are on a different instrument,
mm-hmm.
it's so percussion can sometimes be, like you said, just a very simple setup for you and a very simple setup for Jack, our principal timpani.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be everything in the kitchen sink.
Yes.
And you've got 5 people back there with you, and it's like man-to-man or zone defense is how it looks, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You're dividing and conquering. And you are all specialists to an insane degree on all these different instruments, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to trust that everybody's going to do their job on completely different instruments. Unlike even a harp section or a string section or a wind section, it's not like you have 3 people playing snare drum and you're going to match that timbre.
Sure.
So how do you even start?
It's so situationally, specific. Like in a big piece of rep, say it's like bass drum, cymbal, snare drum, like we had with Elgar 1.
Yeah.
There's sort of a hierarchy of sounds that we all know through, just having done this a long time. And we know, we generally know what the balance should be, what we're going for. And I think the people who I play with here, we're very good at playing together and sort of matching each other's sounds and ideas and stuff.
Hierarchy of sound.
Yes.
How do you have that automatically by instrument? Is it, you said that you just kind of know it from doing it for a long time. So could you map that out?
So say an Elgar 1, where I played bass drum, and my goal is to not cover the pitch of the timpani. Those 2 instruments often play together, and timpani should be a little bit above bass drum. Bass drum should be supporting the warmth and depth of that sound. Cymbals should be, a present color that doesn't shoot out and overpower the orchestra, but is, very much sort of on top of the, sound world. And snare drum also, a little bit of color there. And, those 2 instruments sort of serve as that role, color and impact, just not overpowering.
That's so cool. Who do you listen to? I know that you guys tend to record during rehearsal, so you actually have a good idea of what balance sounds like
mm-hmm.
in the hall, which I'm sure is really helpful. But in the moment, who are you listening to make these micro adjustments, or is it muscle memory by the time you get to performance?
Again, it depends. Something that's really cool about percussion is we play with everybody depending on the instrument and the context and everything. Mm-hmm. Something like bass drum, often with timpani and low brass, maybe the low strings. Something like the mallet instruments is often with woodwinds or the violins. Snare drum can really be with anything. Sometimes trumpets, sometimes, running 16ths in the strings. So like you kind of have to listen to everybody and, you know, just sort of be on your toes at all times.
Can you two hear yourselves in a realistic way from where you are? Or do you have to trust feedback from the hall? How do you gauge that in real time?
It's just never going to be what you exactly think it is. Perception's always going to be a little bit off. So like, no, like feedback is very important.
Okay.
And sort of just like checking yourself, you know, because no, like the sound you get on top is not the sound that's going to the very back of the hall.
It's the same here. We always think that we're being loud, and then most of the time we get told to play louder.
That is not my experience at all. But
When I say we, I'm talking about the harps.
That's fair.
yeah,
I feel like you guys get the hands more
sure.
than
Which
the low brass section does.
yeah, it's, you know, that's just what it is.
It's hall dependent too.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
depending, like if you're playing in a pit, that might be a different situation depending on where the lip of, you know, how far the stage is coming out and covering the back portion of the pit,
Okay.
versus, you know, a hall where, let's say, the back of the hall end is all smooth wood, so there's a lot of reflection happening there. We've played for that Britain concert with Doug Fitch because of the artwork and light. We had put the velvet paneling on the back, and that actually completely changed the sound of the percussion and the brass that are sitting in the back row.
Like completely changed. Did it dampen? Did it?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about that while I close the door. So how do you adjust when you suddenly have a dampening effect? I don't think you're necessarily playing louder. Are you doing, or is it that simple?
Yes and no. I mean, at least in my case, I have at this point probably over hundreds of different sticks and mallets that all have like different sounds, different colors, and project differently. So
No, I want to ask that. How many triangles do you own?
I don't have too many triangles, probably like less than 10.
Oh, I wanted so badly when we did that gag video.
Yes.
I was like, I hope he has a lot, because I would just love for
I
it to
could
be
have.
progressively smaller and smaller and smaller. So you have only 10.
Less than 10.
You know, most normal people
Don't have any.
that many triangles.
That's
Not zero, but just not that many.
somewhere in between.
somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's fair. And I'm still relatively early in my career, and my collection has only been getting bigger, and
So on average, how many triangles does a percussionist own?
it can really get to concerning numbers.
What would be a number that would concern you about yourself?
Oh, that's a good question.
If I was getting above like 15 to 20,
Okay.
it would like, I would think my like sound palette was covered at that point. But then like you just never know. Like you play a piece and you just don't think it's right, and you find excuses to buy things all the time.
Do people give you triangles?
I have been given triangles before.
So what makes you choose a certain triangle over another triangle? Like for the Dvorak Cello Concerto.
So something like in general, always you want to make your choices about instruments, sticks, mallets, whatever, through like orchestration, score study. Is this triangle like a lower pitched with like dark overtones that would fit better for maybe like a Mahler 6, like, you know, really intense moment, or like a Dvorak Cello Concerto that, you know, that started the third movement was a little bit more like intense and like more in your face. So I wanted something that had more like beef to it,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense. As opposed to like a Waltz of the Flowers. You
Mhm.
want something that's very like heavenly and like sparkly. So
This is amazing. It's because no, this is why this is so much fun.
I mean, I'm wondering, like, if someone asked for a specific triangle sound, would you be kind of would you bring different triangles to try and discuss this, or is this kind of something that you feel you've been able to make this musical decision on your own? And also, or is this something that's also passed on from your teachers where they say, hey, this kind of repertoire you should use?
I definitely, people have like come up with good ideas about like what instruments work well in different contexts, and you want to, sort of like build upon those ideas. But I mean, that's part of what makes my job fun, is I get to make decisions about like the sounds I want to bring to the orchestra. And sometimes it's not the right answer. So you always want to be sort of thinking about it and checking yourself. But like, no, I mean, if I just owned one triangle and always brought in my one triangle and just played it, and it's like, that's my triangle sound, it would take a lot of the fun out of this, I think.
Which, it's a great answer.
Janna, and clearly we're on the same page. And just the idea of having like, here's one of 10 basses that I'm going to bring in today.
Sure. Well, you're only limited by your funds and
physical space in one's house.
Yeah.
But that's okay. So, and if someone's never been backstage, or not backstage, but at the back of the stage when there's a big percussion setup, even when it's just Jack, like he's got a whole bag full of timpani stacks with different heads, different wraps. Like,
yeah,
I think people don't necessarily realize that. Even they see the map, but they don't necessarily see the choose your own adventure fun that's happening. So you're talking about colors. So even just, obviously the materials of what you're playing change things rapidly, but even the materials of the sticks that you use, or the type of, it's yarn sometimes, right? That like,
depending on the instrument. Yeah.
Yeah. So even like the type of wrap over the stick head changes infinitely what something can sound like. So how much, so like, okay, so like double reed players, bassoons and oboes, spend a lot of their time making reeds. How much of your time is spent in the infinite multiverse number of possible combinations, narrowing down what you want?
Yeah, there's sort of like you can go a little too crazy about this. Like, there are things that work, like, generally, and you don't want to like stray too far outside of those boundaries too often. Like, if you have something that's like, okay, this is a generally good sound, like that's often the right answer. But like maybe like more special moments, like, like the huge range of dynamic spectrum, something that's really, really soft, something that's really, really loud, special colors, like solo moments, then you can sort of start to like dig into like, oh, like, how do I really want this to sound? What do I want to project? And then you can start to get really in the weeds of like stick choice.
Okay. Janna, is there anything in Harpland that, is there a type of string? Okay.
Yes, actually. So I was just talking about this with the harpist that was here last week about what type of strings that she uses, because that for pedal harps, the kind of white strings that so we have different types of strings. We have wire strings that are always down at the bottom of the harp to create the low pitches, and then starting kind of about 2 octaves up from the bottom, then you have gut usually, and then some harpists will use nylon, and it's just this ongoing debate on whether to use gut or nylon. I personally think whatever floats your boat is fine. I like to use gut just because that I think the sound is a little bit more sparkly, but people will use nylon because that they're cheaper and they're less likely to break.
So is there a difference in how they feel to play them?
Not as much. I think I would be able to feel more if you had like nylons in the middle octaves of the harp, but usually professional harps won't have that.
Okay. So how big of a deal is having another set of strings handy for a harpist, when you say a string breaks,
Mhm.
so violinists and violists, this is a lot more common. Bass players, this like shouldn't happen. If a bass string breaks, you are in danger.
Oh, yes.
But harp strings must break often enough for that to be a real concern.
Yes, I always have a pouch on stage with me with extra strings, just in case I have to fix one during, a rehearsal or concert or something, which has happened multiple times.
What was the worst story?
Oh, okay. So I was playing for a musical. It was the overture, which if you don't know what an overture is, it's the very first moment in the musical that's just the orchestra. I have all of these giant glisses in it. And so I have a string pop that's necessary for the ending of this. So usually you just, put the harp down and deal with it. But for some reason, I decided I'm going to keep in time. I'm going to keep doing my glisses. And I start changing the string one hand and I got it.
What?
I mean, I would have a few measures of rest, right? So, but I'm sitting there with the harp back on my shoulder, fixing it, and then, twisting it and stuff as I'm playing the glisses with my other hand.
Janna, would you please act out per height where the twisting has to happen for you to...
Well, it depends on where this was within reach. Luckily, it wasn't lower, because that would have been impossible. It was one of the higher strings.
Okay, so I want to circle back real fast to this idea that you guys have mastered instruments that require 4 individual limbs to move, often at odds with one another. And this is a prime example of that, where the right hand or the left hand is continuing on as if nothing is happening, and the other hand is frantically trying to change a string.
Yes.
What?
I like to multitask. What can I say?
Can you drive a stick shift?
I have never tried.
I bet you'd be really good at it.
I don't know. This may sound counterproductive, but I'm actually really not coordinated, and I have very bad depth perception.
Wait.
I relate to that, honestly. I'm a very clumsy person.
How? You both you're both so delicate. I don't understand. You both are so...
You haven't seen how many times I drop my pencil during a rehearsal. It's unbelievable. Sometimes my picks that I have, my felt picks that I use for glisses, will end up in the violins because that I just forget they're on the stand and turn my page.
Oh, I thought they went flying, and I thought that would be the fun.
That has also happened on occasion.
But if you have your instrument in your hand,
mm-hmm.
your coordination is obviously phenomenal. Do you think there's something about all the training and discipline that allows you to not be clumsy or uncoordinated while you are doing this very specialized thing that does not apply elsewhere?
I would say ultimately yes. Music is a very natural thing to people, but playing these instruments is pretty unnatural ultimately. We don't just start life and we can play the snare drum or marimba. It is something that is learned and practiced, and anybody has the ability to get good at these instruments. It is just about sort of putting in that effort. Nobody is naturally good at these things.
That feels fair. Did piano help you with the sense of being able to divorce your right hand and your left hand?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. How much of, when composers are writing for mallet instruments and for harp, how do you know? Because we had a fun moment at Christmas where we had an ice storm, and I ended up subbing on Celeste, and that is the most scared I've been in a long, long time. And you just looked at me and went, "Don't worry, I have everything that you have in my part. I've essentially got you covered. Don't." And that was a huge relief to me, but it was also a huge surprise because yes, there's keyboard-like structure to your parts, but I did not imagine so much of that would cross over. So when you look at a harp part or a mallet part, how do you know someone knows what they're doing? And how do you know that you're in for a rough time?
I'll let you go first on this one.
Sure. I generally, if we're talking about a single mallet part, rarely do I come across a thing that's this is just completely unplayable. It does happen occasionally, but generally, like with a lot of the orchestra rep, it's fine. The issues that arise with percussion is when something is logistically impossible.
Okay.
Meaning, like, you're writing for me to play 4 different instruments in the span of like 3 measures, and it's all these different sounds. It would require all these different mallets, and you're giving it all to one player. Like, then it's like, that's impossible.
Okay. Because you only have 2 hands and 2.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, 2 hands, 2 feet.
How often do you have to rewrite percussion assignments, percussion parts to kind of make the impossible possible?
Depends. I think sometimes with movie scores, that can be an issue. Especially, when they, make these movies in the studios, they aren't thinking about, oh, we'll be performing this live someday. So like they are like, isolating sounds and like moments to like sort of get the effects, and then, we get to play them on stage, which is awesome and a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you like get a part and it's just so much going on in such a little amount of time, and you need to sort of mess around with the like logistics of it in order to make it possible.
Does that take a lot of preparation? And
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Do you prefer your percussion sections man-to-man or zone? Because I know that there's my limited knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you can have setups where there's enough instruments available that you could assign people to just like at their stations.
Yes.
Or you could have people free floating, almost like a kitchen, where you have people
Right.
moving in and out and going to different places.
It's always a dream when you can just stay in one spot and have your nice little setup around you and be able to just do everything and not have to run. But sometimes that's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Limited by just, we don't have, 5 vibraphones, so I can't put 5 vibraphones on the stage. No, I mean, like, running around happens all the time, but it is always a little frantic. It's never like the best thing in the world. But I guess to answer your question, that would be zone.
Great.
I'm more of a zone kind of guy.
That makes sense. And just kind of try to keep the possibility of like impact and collision.
Yeah,
Absolute
you want to eliminate chaos variables,
Mm-hmm.
basically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. For harp,
Mm-hmm.
opportunities for collision should be relatively minuscule.
Correct.
But what composers have you looked at a part and either said, oh yes, or oh no?
Okay. I made a list for this.
Yes.
So it really does depend on the purpose. Are you writing well for how the harp functions in an orchestra, or how like playable that it is on the instrument is very different. Weirdly enough, I found a lot of guitar composers are like great harp writers. Like Hinastera, phenomenal. We love Hinastera.
Even
yeah.
though you don't like guitar?
Well, at that phase in life, I did not.
So now you appreciate, okay, so you appreciate a guitarist approach.
Oh, yes. I just didn't like playing it for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Just got bored. I don't know.
It's just too small.
Yeah. I need a large instrument. Okay, so Mahler is great. Rhoda Berlioz, who had an obsession with the harp. Berlioz actually had a harpist that he would go to go through his parts, which is like great, which is why we love his harp parts.
Yeah, that's the dream.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hinastera, I said Puccini. We love Puccini. And then William Grant Still also wrote really nice harp parts.
He did. We did his, years ago, we did like his quintet. I think it's just his quintet. I need to look that back up, but it was absolutely phenomenal. Had a huge harp part.
Yeah.
So.
It's fun stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the positives.
Those are the positives.
Name names.
Okay. So for sound purposes, we love Strauss and Wagner. For playability purposes,
Mm-hmm.
we curse their names.
Yep.
So something that composers love to do is to write 5-fingered things. And actually, harpists only use 4 fingers on each hand. We don't use our pinkies.
Oh.
Yes, it's a very common misconception for everyone. And
Okay.
so every composer ever, thinks of a harp as an upright piano. And
Right.
that's just not what we are.
Okay. Well, why no pinky? Because it's just not strong enough? Because it doesn't reach? Like, what's the...
It's the reaching. It's
Okay.
because that it, the way that we play, technically, it just, your 4th finger would span further than your pinky. There's literally no reason to have your pinky.
Okay, so are you therefore rewriting potential parts that involve 5-finger playing in order to be playable with 4, or are you suddenly using pinky and cursing them?
Well, it depends. There's a Strauss excerpt from Don Juan where there's a lot of quintuplets, and so we actually just remove a note, usually, unless you're a crazy person and can somehow manage to play that with all 5 notes, which I have seen people do, and I have the utmost respect for that. I do not have time to do that. But yeah, you pretty much just sit there and figure out if there's a way that you could possibly cross under, or do a slide or something, or if you just have to nix the notes and how important it is.
Do you have to assign arms to a range of the instrument, or can you play from bottom to top with both hands?
Cannot reach the bottom of the instrument with my right hand. You
Okay.
you can reach the top of the instrument with your left hand. It's just not really convenient.
Is that because the harp rests on your right shoulder?
No, it's because that whenever you're playing with orchestra, we have triangles too. You have the harp that you're viewing, so what you're playing on and what you actively need to see. You have your music down, and then you also have the conductor that you're watching. So to have to turn your head and look at the very top of the harp with your left hand is just very tricky. It takes away from what you're doing with the music and the conductor.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a balance.
How much then are you relying on? Are you just going in blind?
I mean, I count, and that helps a lot. But there are some times when you kind of have to guess a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to do on piano than it is on harp, though. I don't know why. It's kind of hard. I would be able to play the piano blindfolded, but I couldn't do that with the harp.
Okay, that's really interesting. Right, because are harps also, are the strings color-coded? Because this is something you can't see from the audience, that there are...
Yes.
So what strings on the harp are marked?
Yeah, so all the red strings are C, and then all of the black strings are F. Black or blue. Some harps have blue.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
So it's not just, because I imagine that the visual is just like, all right, here's
Here's a bunch of strings. Have fun. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Strauss and Wagner,
Yes.
and not being able to see anything with your
Oh,
gun at a
yes.
certain point.
We have chromatics, any sort of key changes within the span of the measure where you're going from all flats to all sharps. I don't have 7 feet, unfortunately. I only have 2, and so those 2 are only able to do 2 pedals at a time.
And on a harp that you would see on stage at the Holland, you physically have to move levers at the bottom, or pedals at the bottom of the harp, to change keys. You
Yes.
can't just, it's not a chromatic harp, correct? So is it just a C major scale on the instrument?
C flat when all the pedals are up, C natural when the pedals are in the middle, and then C sharp when they're all down.
Okay, so you are constantly...
Every accidental that you see is a pedal.
But it changes automatically. Like if you put the E pedal up, that means all E's become flat.
All E's become flat. Yes.
Okay. So could you play organ?
Maybe. I think honestly that the organ is the only instrument I would consider to be harder than the harp.
Yeah.
Because of that, because that it just takes so much more focus. They also have multiple keyboards that they're dealing with, and sounds, and I can't begin to fathom that.
So any composer that's not mindful of the time needed to get between one key to the other Because you're not, again, it's like there's not just a magic pedal that turns the harp from like C major to B flat or something like that. You have to manually find B and E and manipulate those things.
Correct.
Okay. Have there been composers recently where you've seen that and just went?
I think maybe in a pop show. I don't remember which one. But usually I kind of find, again, what's important in the music. Is it more important to have whatever's coming before the key change or after? And then you just make a decision based on that.
Do you ever have to do that as well? Do you have to drop things that don't physically make sense?
The hope is that you never have to. That I always try not to. And, ultimately, unlike with harp, you can have more players, more percussionists, and try to get things covered. But sometimes when just, the reality is you can't do that, then yes, some things sometimes need to be dropped.
Speaking of extra harpists, going back to, so we have the planets coming up.
Yes.
One of my favorite movements is Saturn. Of all, and it's a massive harp feature. I mean, the whole piece is a lovely harp feature, but Saturn is a massive harp feature, and it's more eerie than any of the other movements in the work. How do you, without changing strings, how much of your approach can dictate the sound coming out of the instrument to change from darkness and brightness? Like, how much of what you do physically with your hands impacts how the harp?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
You can definitely change the sound just by how much that you're pressing into the string and where exactly that you're pressing into the string at. Salome, the Dance of the Seven Veils, and there is a common excerpt for us, and so those chords are, kind of a little bit darker, right? And so to achieve that sound, then you really want to have your hands in the middle of the string as much as possible. Whereas for some other stuff, for like a cleaner sound, then you can go closer to the soundboard so that there's not as much resonating or ringing. For an eerie sound, I might want something a little bit more weighted, so then I would be pressing into the strings just a little bit more, less on the fingertips.
It's really similar with percussion as well. We do have, options with sticks and, different instruments and stuff, but you can definitely use weight and like impact in a lot of different ways to get different sounds and, something lighter versus something much more heavy. It's all about body weight and just kind of controlling gravity in the way you are dropping the stick.
When you're starting out though in percussion, is what you're learning, like let's say it's drum pad and sticks, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Is what you're learning with that universal for most percussion, or at least is that where you start for most percussion?
I really think so. That's like home base, and everything kind of comes out from that. And there's tons of different techniques that aren't directly related to two sticks and a pad, but like that's where like your like sound concept comes from. That's where a lot of your technique comes from, and everything really comes out of that.
What instrument was the most, as you were branching out, what instrument back there was the one that threw you the most to start with?
To start with, definitely is marimba. Anytime you have to hold four mallets, which marimba is a very common instrument where that happens, that is a super unnatural like thing for your hands to do, and especially at the beginning, like that was pretty painful, like to be able to just gain the like muscle control, because you're using muscles that you literally use for pretty much nothing else.
So could you like mimic, like where did the sticks go?
Sure. So there's a few different ways that people do it, but the way I learned is one stick, rests in between your middle finger and sort of is supported by your thumb and index, and then another stick is held by your back two fingers. And that's where the like difficulty comes in, is these two back fingers are like the weak fingers.
Yeah.
And they have to be supporting the weight of a mallet, and be able to change intervals and be able to, support the sound that you need to be able to get. So at first, like, it's really weak. And as you practice it, it's pretty painful. But like anything over time, it gets easier. You gain the muscle memory.
Was it Chuan that destroyed his pinkies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not really a legend. He really did it. He was trying to strengthen his pinkies, and he developed this device that was like doing like pinky, like a little gym for pinkies.
No.
And he completely wrecked his hands instead. So I'm glad that
I would advise against.
yes,
that.
no pinky curls.
Do you also have the same like triangle situation for harp where you're looking at your marimba, whatever mallet instrument, your music, and your conductor, or is it something like it takes your entire concentration? You have to memorize the music. Are you able to do this blindfolded?
Definitely not blindfolded.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure percussion is the only instrument where we are not actually touching our instrument. We're holding the sticks. And so there's like a level of disconnect in between, like, I'm holding the sticks and then I'm hitting something that I can't physically feel. So I don't have that input to sort of work off of. So it's something that has gotten easier with time and sort of is a never-ending battle to be able to split your attention between, especially with mallet instruments where you're dealing with pitch and, a wide range of space. Split your attention between the orchestra, the music, the conductor, and what you're actually doing. Where if it's like challenging, you want to be able to like see where you're going and get that sort of input to like feel comfortable. But that you can't always do that because you need to be with the group.
And there's clearly some instruments that have like a much more high impact. So like a glockenspiel and a snare versus like a bass drum roll or something like that, where there's the margin for error.
Definitely. Yeah, some are much smaller than others. Yeah. And if it goes wrong, it'll be a lot more obvious on some than others. The worst instrument to play in orchestra is chimes, because chimes, you have to have them to the side of you, because if they're in front of you, then you can't see anything. So they have to be to the side. So you need to split the attention between the chimes that are over here. You're holding two sticks. It's like up here. It's not close to your body in a natural position. Then you have to be able to look at the conductor, look at your music, and also be able to see the chimes and play loud, impactful notes that project very well.
And you're playing with your own section too, so you're listening to your other section members.
Yeah. So
and on time.
Right. Yeah. So chimes suck. Chimes are great. Chimes are an awesome instrument.
But what a thing to be like, this thing, I hate this thing. It's chimes.
No, I mean, because it is true. It's sensory overload in a way that is just unfortunate when you're playing with the group.
And a lot of pressure for one very specific moment in time, kind of, that builds up. So how do you ever, is there a kind of preparation that you do, like an upbeat of some kind, in terms of making sure that you're like lined up, kind of like a prep hit where you don't actually hit it and then right before hitting it?
Yes.
Okay. Is that pretty common?
Definitely. And true of pretty much all instruments. I like to physically touch the instrument before even, getting my sticks ready to play. So it's just like, I'm like reminding myself, like, this is where it is. Because if you don't do that, like, you can miss, and that's no fun to, swing your mallet and then just miss the instrument. Pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Like, just like once, and like
like a chime. You're waiting for this chime hit, and then it just doesn't come.
It just goes by the side.
Yeah,
it's just a totally non-stressful, non-pressure moment. I would
for sure. And that's like that's a common issue with as you're beginning and like sort of learning through time. I'm a lot better at that now, than I was, 5-10 years ago. But it's still something that you have to be thinking about, sort of the spatial awareness.
And to be fair, stuff happens on string instruments all the time. You're like, I don't know what. I was in an audition and my left hand just flew off the fingerboard, and I could not tell you why or how. It was just I was watching it and it was beautiful and going this way, and I was like, go back. You just have no idea especially if someone like moves. I imagine if anyone adjusts things in between performances or moves things, and it's like a spatial memory as well that you have to reorient.
Definitely, yeah.
Oh man.
Not to make it sound more insane than
make it sound exactly as badass as it is.
It's just playing the drums at the end of the day.
It is, but it clearly isn't. Okay, so you guys, this has been wonderful. We both started on piano. You both clearly took your secondary pursuits in a really awesome direction. But if you had 30 minutes on stage, no consequences, could pick up any instrument and mess with it without getting into trouble, what instrument are you gravitating for?
Let you go first.
I go back and forth on this. Obviously, slapstick is one. We have an ongoing rivalry about the slapstick, but now if you hear our Christmas shows, the harp does have a part on Sleigh Ride, which is wonderful.
What was the rivalry on slapstick?
I don't know. I don't know if I'd call it a rivalry.
That was a very
I
quick
said I
response.
couldn't.
So Sleigh Ride, the Leroy Anderson piece that we play a lot during Christmas, does not have a harp part to it.
But now it does.
Yes, now it does.
Previously did not.
Previously did not, and Janna really wanted to play the slapstick.
I offered because they seemed like they were busy back there.
It is. It's a busy little percussion piece. With all the sounds we're making to make it sound like a horse and a sleigh and everything. But slapstick is a much more serious, complicated instrument than you would think.
Is it?
Yes.
It depends.
Yes.
The sound depends on size,
Yeah.
weight, the technique,
Yeah,
the angle.
You would think after all of this, I wouldn't be so facetious.
if the color of the slapstick isn't right, it's just not Sleigh Ride.
It's not snappy enough,
Right. And not to say, Janna is a wonderful musician, but I don't think you've practiced slapstick once in your life.
I offered to audition, but...
And maybe that audition will still happen, but we were able to find a Sleigh Ride harp part. And so now Janna will be busy for every Sleigh Ride for the rest of time.
I did really enjoy my harp part.
I'm so
That was
glad.
put on your stand by Paul.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, they came up with this stupid, sheepish grin on their faces between a rehearsal, and it's,
Yep.
it's great.
Yep.
But realistically, probably the cello is...
I don't know. I'm willing to pay for a slapstick lesson so that we can get you an audition as a substitute.
I've told him he can play second harp on Mars if I get to play slapstick. So
Honestly, I just don't know if I have interest there.
So harp is not the instrument you
Harp
can
is
play for
not
30 minutes?
the instrument.
Well,
I really do think I have the most fun out of anybody on stage. But that's not answering your question. I know
It kind of is. That's great. I plays the best instrument. I don't need to try any other instrument.
I'm just going to gatekeep percussion from everybody else. These are mine.
Well, yes. That is true.
Okay.
I know I've tried to buzz a brass mouthpiece before, and I know I can't get sound out of that.
Okay.
So I'm not so curious there. I'm curious if I could get a sound out of any of the woodwind instruments. If I was given 30 minutes to mess around and mess with my embouchure, my non-existent embouchure, and pressure, and just see, it's in 30 minutes, could I get sound out of it? I don't know.
Is there one in particular that you're is there a solo or something where you're oh, if I could get a sound out of that would make my whole day? Or is it just the section as a whole, that if you could get a sound out, then you'd be good?
You just go down the row.
Yeah, well, I don't feel confident I could get a sound out of the double reeds. That seems like pretty complicated. Not to say that the others aren't complicated, but I feel like clarinet I would have a shot of getting a sound out of.
Mhm.
Flute also maybe. But I would just want to try them all so I could know.
Okay. Well, once you're done teaching Janna slapstick,
Yeah.
we'll talk with our principal wins. We'll see what we can do.
Okay.
Oh my God. Guys, thank you so much. This was a delight. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. The lights didn't even go off. Look at that.
Wow.
Oh, that was so much fun. Thank you guys.